We inquired as to why this CCTV is missing, but Essex Police elected not to give us an answer to our questions. Lee Balkwell died in 2002, but it wasn't until 2008 that his inquest was held here in Chelmsford. But it wasn't just a 6-year wait for an inquest. This was the third attempt. The first two failed under very strange circumstances.
Les Balkwell, in the lead up to that inquest, he had a meeting at Brentwood Police Station with the detective constable who was taking an interview from him at the time. And during that interview, the detective inspector, I'll give his name, Ian Rayner, took a phone call from a man called Derek Bynes, who had been appointed as the coroner's officer. And he was heard on the telephone by Les Balkwell to say, look, I'm going to run this inquest as an accidental death. Les Balkwell heard it, mentioned it to the officer. The officer wrote a report up on it confirming that those words had been said. And to cut a long story short, as a result of that, the solicitor made representations and Derek Bynes was taken off the case. Clearly corrupt, trying to manipulate a whole inquest as an accident.
The next attempt at an inquest also ended in failure. When the inquest did at last get underway, it lasted 9 days and marked an important shift in the focus of the case.
Les Balkwell's barrister Tony Ventham said quite clearly in submission, private submission to the coroner, there is overwhelming circumstantial evidence that Lee Balkwell was murdered, overwhelming circumstantial evidence. The coroner said, no, I'm not putting that to the jury, there's not enough evidence. So the jury's range of options was limited, but the jury said that he was killed by, the verdict was gross negligence manslaughter. Basically was suggesting that he was killed by the fault of the people on the farm, but not alleging deliberate intent.
Meanwhile, as the inquest was going on, a new investigation had just begun into the conduct of the police. The Independent Police Complaints Commission, the body that looks into complaints against police officers, was once again turning its eyes to the Balkwell case. But unlike in 2003, when they effectively allowed Essex Police to investigate themselves, the IPCC this time decided they should handle it personally. This time, the outcome was completely different.
26 separate complaints were upheld of misconduct. 13 against the Chief Superintendent Graham Bull, in other words, the most senior officer on the case. Another 2 against Detective Superintendent Gareth Wilson. And then various other officers, 6 other officers, total of 26 complaints. And just very briefly, the main complaints against the Chief Superintendent Graham Bull failed to identify appropriate witnesses, failed to re-interview the leading suspect, Simon Bromley, when there was clear cause to do so, forensic failures of many kinds, failed to consider the possibility of foul play.
The 2012 IPCC report resulted in yet another review of the case. Bit by bit, the old narrative was being overturned. The investigation was now labelled as seriously flawed by the IPCC. Action had to be taken.
And they recommended that there should be a brand new investigation by another police force, an outside police force, which is what we asked for. So very clear recommendation. This is so bad, so flawed, that there must be a full reinvestigation. It didn't happen because the IPCC only has the legal power to recommend. It can't force a police force. So what Essex Police did was, first of all, delayed for 3 months, did nothing basically. And then they put it out to West Midlands Police Force for, as you say, a review.
There was a review by West Midlands Police, led by a top officer named Chief Superintendent Muirfield, who found he made 91 recommendations to whoever investigated after his review. The funny thing was that Essex fluffed about for 6 months before they sorted out Kent to do it.
Problem we've got with Kent, if I may say so briefly, is that Kent and Essex are very much merged, collaborating forces, sharing a lot of resources at the top level. They have a joint senior organised crime directorate with staff covering both forces. So the idea, Mike, that this was an independent force is false. So we've still never got what the IPCC recommended in 2009. Kent is not independent from Essex.
How can they investigate when you've got Mark Hall, Gareth Wilson, both involved in the Kent and Essex Serious Organised Crime Directorate, and yet they've been found guilty of misconduct within the case?
When we asked Kent Police why they had been selected to carry out this investigation, they told us to speak to Essex Police. Essex Police declined to comment on the matter. As part of the new investigation, the police sought to re-examine Lee's body. Almost 11 years after Lee's death, his body was to be exhumed. It was a sign that the police were taking the new investigation seriously. But over a decade later, was there really any useful evidence to be found? It was a blustery March night in 2013 when the police and the media descended on an Upminster cemetery. With the old investigation now discredited as a shambles, this was an opportunity to begin putting things right. Did the exhumation of Lee's body reveal anything previously unknown?
I can't tell you that for the simple reason that the police have refused to disclose the full report of Dr. Benjamin Swift, who carried out the report. Now, we have got a copy of the post-mortem report, which is a limited document on the main findings. The much longer report has not been disclosed to us. But I think it's fair to say that the exhumation didn't produce any surprises.
We asked Essex Police what the new exhumation revealed, if anything, and they wouldn't tell us either. Kent's investigation seemed far more focused and determined than the original Essex one. It brought with it something that Les Balkwell had waited years for: arrests. Tony Bennett recounts what at first seemed like a breakthrough in the case.
Simon Bromley, he was arrested along with other members of his family. And he was arrested on suspicion of murder, that's what the police told us. And then a whole year passed before the police then said that they were charging him for a gross negligence manslaughter.
In addition, Simon Bromley was also charged with violations of health and safety regulations. 4 other people were arrested under suspicion of perjury and perverting the course of justice, but were never charged with anything. When we inquired as to why all of these severe charges had decreased or disappeared, Essex Police offered no comment.
The charge of gross negligence manslaughter is back to the accident scenario. It's not an allegation of deliberate killing at all. It's an allegation that he negligently allowed this accident to happen. And neither I nor Les Balkwell can possibly accept that, because it's not compatible with the 141 evidential points that I've set out here. So what's been going on in the last few months, Mike, just to bring you up to date, is that we have been making strenuous efforts to stop this prosecution. And there doesn't seem to be any way of doing it. This prosecution is going to allow, we say, Simon Bromley to get away with saying, well, OK, it was an accident and I've been punished for it. But it's a false prosecution because it flies in the face of the overwhelming circumstantial evidence that this was not an accident.
For it to be gross negligence, Lee had to be working at 1:03 in the morning, which he wasn't. Work had finished round about 9:30. There's so many different things that point to that. But they are cherry picking and promoting. Now, we've got evidence that there was only 1/4 metre of concrete left in that drum. What that equates to is about 50 minutes work for one man. Now, they've maintained all along that there was 2 in that drum, Lee and Simon Bromley, so that should cut it down a bit. The 50 minutes is clean it out and wash it down, right? When the fire brigade turn up at 3 o'clock in the morning and do their photography and their videoing, it's all soaking wet, piles of water. That shows that the drum has been washed out. The drum only gets washed out at the end of play, or at the end of work, or when you've cleaned it out and it's finished. Otherwise, you're getting straight inside with it soaking wet. There's no need. You want to get rid of the concrete. Also, there's a small pile of slurry there. Now that shows that the lorry had been washed out. Well, it obviously hadn't been washed out after Lee died, because you've got a body half in. So it had been washed out before Lee died, which is the signing off signature, or the signing off to say, work's done, we've washed the lorry out. So how come Lee's body, if they've finished work, how come they're trying to prosecute Bromley for gross negligence? That has to happen when you're working. They weren't working.
Les theorises that when the concrete mixer drives off and returns after 9 p.m, it was collecting water to complete the cleaning of the drum. This could have been when work ended for the night. Simon Bromley stood trial for gross negligence manslaughter, but was found not guilty. He was found guilty of breaching health and safety regulations, of not providing a safe working environment for Lee. It is not his first conviction. In 2006, he was jailed for 8 years for a firearms offence and for operating a cocaine business. The police would say that this conviction, however minor, represents justice, that Simon Bromley has been held accountable for his part in Lee's death. Bromley himself has said that the death was deeply traumatic for him. The major problem is, and always will be, that the original investigation was found to be inadequate. Great police work later on cannot compensate for poor police work at the very start. Essex and Kent Police have not stated that they view the Balkwell case to be permanently closed, but it is now difficult to imagine them reopening it.
And the worst thing about it all is we don't think he was dead when they put him in the drum, because one of the worst things I've ever had to read in my life is that Lee was biting his tongue when he was found in the drum. Well, I'm sorry, but, you know, you bite the tongue, I would think, when you die, not, you know. This was an execution.
Les told us that there is more to come in this case, that he will continue to fight on, and that new developments will show the case in a new light. He remains determined to win the argument and prove the police wrong.